Check. Reporting to you from my living room because I feel like it. Hello, Bobby Torres of Frightbox, recording here to explain 3 main reasons why only mixing MIDI drums is a terrible idea. Now, don't get me wrong. I absolutely love MIDI drums. I use them all the time. I use EZdrummer for pre-production, songwriting, and the truth is close to half of the songs that I mix for clients utilize MIDI drums. So the question is, why am I here telling you that mixing MIDI drums exclusively is such a terrible thing? Now, after running this YouTube channel for a few years, many people that watch the channel send in their mixes. And after polling my audience, I've realized that 80% of my audience only mix MIDI drums. And the truth is, it shows. Now, again, I am not knocking MIDI drums. I use them all the time myself on a near daily basis. The problem is, if you only mix MIDI drums and you have no experience mixing real drums, it could be a bad thing. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you the 3 reasons why mixing MIDI drums exclusively isn't a great idea. And at the end of the video, I'm going to describe to you exactly what to do to combat this issue. And luckily, it's really straightforward. Now, before I dive into the 3 reasons, I just want to let you know that this video is not for engineers that mix live drums and MIDI drums. It's only for people that are working in their home studios that have no experience mixing live drums at all and only mix MIDI drums. So just keep that in mind. Now, the first thing that seems to mess people up when they mix MIDI drums exclusively is that most people don't realize just how processed MIDI drums are in the first place. So here's what I find happens a lot. People will scour YouTube looking for drum mixing tutorials. Maybe they're my tutorials, maybe someone else's tutorials, where the tutorial features live raw drum tracks. They look at these techniques and then they try to replicate these exact techniques when they sit down to mix their MIDI drum tracks. Now, live drums, when you're recording them out of your studio, are completely raw. For the most part. They are not perfect, they're generally not pre-EQ'd, and generally not pre-compressed. When you export your MIDI drum tracks, they are more often than not pre-EQ'd, pre-compressed, and almost mix ready most of the time. Now, yes, people have said to me, oh, well, my program claims to be raw drum samples. Maybe that exists out there. I haven't heard it. Even when clients send me projects to mix, they say they sent the raw versions of the samples in their MIDI drum program. And I'm going to tell you, they are not raw. Believe me. So what ends up happening to home studio owners that only mix MIDI drums, they have an unrealistic expectation of what drums actually sound like in the real world. And for the most part, people are mixing MIDI drums to sound like live drums. So if you're taking mixing techniques that are meant to be applied to live raw drums and you apply them to your MIDI drums, they're not going to sound right. Super squash sounding snares that sound overly spiky, overly bright kick drums, cymbals that are extremely loud and sound like they're coming from 2 different universes. These are the things that I hear over and over and over again, and I can clearly hear that whoever mixed the track never mixed live drums before. So that's reason number 1. Let's jump into reason number 2. We have to remember that MIDI drums are perfect when you're editing them to the grid and also dynamically. So if you've never mixed live drum tracks performed by an actual human being, you will make all of your snares sound too consistent. All of your kick drums sound too consistent. All of your tom hits will be overly powerful. Your crash cymbal will be played at full force. But here's the thing, drummers don't actually play like this in the real world. I hear this a lot on extreme metal tracks that people send me, especially things like death metal or gent, where the drums sound like a bunch of cannons and they sound nothing like a real drum set. And this is not the fault of the engineer or the producer. It just comes down to the fact that they have no experience, again, mixing live drums. So they have nothing to compare it to. You're sort of mixing these drums in a vacuum. Now, yes, you can keep in mind to program dynamics into the MIDI drum tracks, but if you have no experience diving deep into real drum tracks, that's a lot easier said than done. And from the hundreds of mixes that people have sent me, it's definitely an issue, believe me. Now, the 3rd reason why mixing MIDI drums exclusively holds so many people back is they end up programming and creating drum parts that no human being could ever play in the real world. Or they end up programming drum parts that no drummer would really play or want to play. That's because so many of us are guitar players, like me. I am not a drummer. The only reason why I have any knowledge of drums at all is because of all of the different drummers that I've worked with and learned from throughout the years. And unfortunately, if you're a bedroom producer and you don't work with live drummers and you don't play drums at all, you have no real world reference or experience to pull from when creating your drum parts. And again, I can hear it a mile away. People will send me songs that have no drum fills or weird drum fills or a floor tom being hit at the same time as a second floor tom and a rack tom and a china, all at the same time. No human being has 4 arms. You can't do that. And believe me, I get it. It's so easy to just create parts that sound cool in the moment. But again, most of us want our productions to sound like a real drummer's playing and a real guitar player's playing and a real bass player's playing. And hopefully a real vocalist is screaming or singing. So let's quickly recap these 3 reasons. Number 1, when you only mix MIDI drums, you use way too much EQ and compression because you think you should use the same mixing techniques that people share on YouTube that are mixing live drums. You shouldn't. The second reason is you end up not using enough dynamics or programming natural sounding dynamics with your MIDI drums. And the third reason is you end up creating parts that drummers don't actually play in the real world. I hear this almost on a daily basis when people send me their mixes. So with that being said, how do you get around this? I'm completely aware that not everyone is interested in producing live bands. I mean, who really wants to deal with drummers, right? There are so many of us that are just interested in creating our own music and producing productions that sound great, again, exclusively for our own music. So again, what do? The answer is simple. Practice mixing multi-tracks of real instruments, especially real drums. You don't have to record real drums, but you should definitely practice to some extent on multi-tracks of real drums so you could hear what raw, real drums actually sound like, because a lot of people have absolutely no idea, and I don't blame them. Now, from what I understand, there are free resources online and Facebook groups where you could download free multi-tracks of local bands and even some bigger bands. But as my gift to you for sticking around and watching this entire video, I've included a link in this video's description to raw drum tracks recorded out of my basic Project Studio. You get the drum tracks to an entire song, kick, snare, snare bottom, both toms, all of the cymbal mics, and room tracks, so you can practice mixing live drums to an actual song that utilized real human beings. This download is absolutely free, and again, I've left a link in this video's description. Click the link, and the files are all yours to practice with. I just want to make this clear that you do not have to go out there and record real drummers to gain this experience. I've found that as long as you practice, again, if you just take the time and listen to and practice mixing live drums, it's going to help your mixing skills when it comes to mixing MIDI drums. And again, I have nothing against MIDI drums. I love them. I use them on a near daily basis, and 50% of my productions that I've mixed for clients feature MIDI drums. I love them. But mixing MIDI drums is a breeze for me because I have experience mixing live drums. That's the truth. And I want you to be able to do the same. And the files I've included with this video will definitely help set you in the right direction. So I'm curious to know, do you only mix MIDI drums? Do you have any interest at all in mixing live drums? Leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear your opinion and what you're up to in your studio. If you found this video helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to click the little bell icon so you can be notified every time I upload a new video on metal and rock production. And until next time, happy mixing.